Hello all, I'm back. Let's see, this is recording. I have adjusted the sound, so hopefully it's a bit less grating. Um, but let's go back to where we had started, or where we had left off, which was that we have set up a basic API endpoint where we can retrieve our high score list, both in Postman and also just within our. Oh, this is our video. Within our web app. In this case, it's just very basic. This is just going straight to the web page. But now that we have retrieving high scores functioning quite well, let us also add the functionality to post a high score. So what we will do is we'll just add another handler here for a web request. This time it will be app.post. I always debate as to whether I want to maybe reuse these endpoints and just use the get and post. And that's like a design decision on your end, based off of how you want to design your app. But we can have the same endpoint here, the same URL, but tell it to listen for this post request instead. And we'll make a new function. Let's call it async function web or post high score handler. What this will do is this will let us be able to handle posting a high score. So what we'll do is we'll just simply, I suppose we could do something of the following. We could say res dot JSON maybe, or res dot send, I don't know. We'll see await save high scores rec.body. I think we want to call this like a high score message, something like that. And what we can do, actually, let's first check to see if this high score message is defined or not. Let's see, something like this. If this exists. Again, this is probably not the best way to check if for existence. There's better ways to do that in JavaScript, but this will work for now. But we could do something like this. If we have a high score message that's formally defined in our body, then we can send it. This one we also have to make sure we use a JSON parser, like we mentioned before. This is our middleware. To make sure that our program knows how to handle these JSON messages properly. So save high scores, this new high score message. So I'm going to refresh this. Hopefully we don't get any weird errors. And now in Postman, what I can do is I can, instead of getting a high score, I can post. My body is, instead of being message, what I'll call this, high score message. High score message. I'll say I want to post a new high score for Christian A with a new high score of 99. Send. We have an error. Cannot post high scores. Cannot post high scores. Oh. It looks like I didn't actually put my handler here in this function. I didn't pass it properly. So post high score handler. Let's see if this works. Let's refresh and send. Success. It might be a good idea to send the list of our high scores right after. I wonder, maybe it might even be a good idea to redirect to the high score request, like the get high scores. But what we can do is we can switch back to a get request, send, and look, we have our high scores in order. We have Christian A 99. It looks like I didn't actually format this correctly. I don't have my name structure. That's a good idea to make sure we're making the format right. Remember, I wanted a name, a key value, entry for name, Christian A, and then score 99. So I guess what we could do, it would be a good idea, if we could say if rec.body.name structure not equals undefined, and rec.body dot score not equal undefined. Let's see if we do this. In fact, right, I'll send this, see if our ordering is right. Oh yeah, this is the get request. Let me go back to the post request. We can send. Looks like we have .by.name. Oop, right, I have to have this high score message. Let's make another temporary variable here just to make things a little cleaner. Let message equal rec.body.high score message. Right. Then what we can do is we can say if message.name. This is probably a better way to formally check this schema here, but this will work for now for us. Success. Now we can go back to our get. Let's test this. Let's get, and we have Christian A listed here properly. Okay, so I suppose what I could do is something along these lines, where, well, we have our high score list. This is working pretty fine. I think this is a pretty good check of the format for now. But basically what we've made is we've basically finished our backend API, almost. And let's review to see what we've done so far. We have the ability to upload data, download data, and this upload and downloaded data is viewable within our browser. And that's the big thing, is that we want to be able to retrieve this through web requests. Again, we're not using a formal database that, you know, there's a lot to be learned about Mongo or SQL, any other database that you might use. But, you know, for simplicity's sake and for time, I started with just a text file, you know, making our own. It's a very, very simple format here, but this is something that can be definitely expanded if one so wished to do so. So now that we basically have finished our back end, we have to figure out how are we going to integrate this with our front end. Remember, you know, we have our front end cookie clicker. This is all written in React, and we have our back end, which is all a Node.js program. And how do we get them to talk to each other? We have to think, how does this front end program work in the first place? So to think about that, let's go back to our setup here. I'm going to stop my server. Let's go into our terminal. Let's give us some more space. And let's look. Remember, when we wanted to run our front end server, all we needed to do was npm run start, and it would run a development server that would host this app. So we have to think, what is happening when we're hosting this app? What is happening when we run npm start? And what's really happening is that create React app is making a tiny little web server. You know, like how we made our own web server here in Node.js, create React app created a little backend server that doesn't really do anything but, you know, host these files so that they can be loaded up on a browser. And then also create React app does some cool things for debugging. And all we really need to replace, the only behavior we need to replace right now is the hosting behavior. Because what we want is we want to be able to run node server.js, and we want to be able to go to localhost and see our React app, because we've already built it for the most part. And how do we do that? We have to think, well, what is React doing under the hood? You know, you're writing this really cool JSX stuff, but then what's happening? Well, you have to go host it somewhere. You have to, you basically have these files that you go to a particular web page, and the server goes and delivers this file to you. It serves this file. That's why we call it a server. And so you have to think, well, where are those files? And you don't really see them, more or less, until we go and we build. We kind of compile this JSX into some more normal style JavaScript. So check this out. What we can do is we can run Npm Run Build. And this kind of goes through an optimized production build, is what it's calling, of our front end that we've made so far. And we can see what it does is it actually puts all these files on a separate folder called build. And you can either serve it with just manually here. Check this out. Serve. Let's look at the folders actually. Let's go to build. And we have our index.html. It's got a lot of our React stuff. It's got most of our, it's all compiled and minified and not really fun to read. It's like, it's like some compiled code, but now it's compiled to JavaScript. And what we want to do is we want to be able to serve these files so that when I go to localhost 3000, I am greeted with my cookie clicker game. And how do we do that? Well, Express has a nice, going back to the Express library, Express has a nice tool that allows us to serve, they call these static files, these static paths. So what we can do is we can actually tell our program, our server program, to serve these files that we've built from React. So this is what we're going to do. We can say something along these lines. App.use express.static, and we have path.join __ dir name build. Righto. We have this. And remember, this was the name of our build directory. This has our This is the name of our build directory. This has all of our compiled, all of our compiled files that we want to serve on the web. Also, we want any we can see what happens here. Let's start here. Let's run our program. Oh, you know what? I forgot to require path. So let's say path equals require path. Let's try that. Let's get rid of this. Refresh. Debug console. It looks like it's working. And look at that. We are now hosting our fully functioning cookie clicker game on our server. And you think, did we accidentally overwrite all of this, really hard work that we did earlier? Well, let's check it out. Let's look at high scores. And no, our data is still here. So this is a critical moment. Take notes here that this is where we are merging our front end to our back end. So to reiterate, how do we host a React front end app using Express? You use this line of code. You use Express static path join dir name build. This is basically saying I want to serve these files statically. So that's all cool. It's all great. But now we have to. There's another step that we might have to use. Let me double check. Let's see. Okay. So occasionally you might have some situations where your front end React program will change the route here. It will change the URL. We call that routing or router. And so we're going to want to redirect any of these arbitrary router changes. So what we can do is at the very bottom, right before we get to all of these, we can write something like this. We want to specify that every time we get just some unknown endpoint, we just redirect back to our front page. We'll find this useful later. So what do we want to do? We have our response, and this time we just want to send a file. res.send file. We'll call this path.join. Journey build. So this should just redirect us to the front page. So now if we just say nothing, just some arbitrary, maybe not, maybe that didn't work. Well, what we have here is now a setup where we have a front end that's being hosted. Because what happens is you can write a front end, but it still has to be served. It still has to be hosted by your back end. And then we have our back end logic. But now we need to modify our cookie clicker game to accept this new back end logic that we've developed. And so we think, well, what are we going to do? Well, to start, we definitely want to show, we want to display our our high score list, right? So how do we go about doing that? And I'd say the best way to do that would be to make a new React component specifically to show off the cool things that we've been working on from the high score list. Something like a table that can let us we can populate with high scores. So this has some fun work cut out for us because it involves making some repeating. It involves going back into the front end and doing some neat tricks with React. So what we can do is we can go to our high score list. Let's go to our SRC. This is our React front end. And let's look at our app.js and let's see, this is basically more or less what our app looks like. We have our header, we have some tables that tell us the number of cookies that we have, the number of hands. But we want to make a new dynamic table that's populated with basically with just information that's remote data from our high score list. And what we can do is we'll just make a new component, and we'll define that new component in a new file. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it highscores.js. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all the same things that we do when we normally make components. We want to import React. I'm not sure if I'm going to use state. Maybe I'll just import React from React. How about that? That looks pretty good. Import React from React. What else do I need to import? This will be good for now. Then what I want to do is I want to define my object, my high score component. So I'll say function high score list params, like I'm defining any other React component. I'll want to return. This is going to be set up like a table. So I'm just going to start off really basic. Table row, and then my table header is going to be, misspelled. I have my name, and then my other table header, I'll have my score. And just as a filler, just to test, I'll just say table row, I'll have table header, Eggert, and then table header. These should be table data, not header. I'll modify these accordingly. Table data, Eggert. And then let's say he has he's a pretty good score. So this is my new component that I've made just to test, and I'll just export this. I'll say export default high score list. So this is all saved. This all looks pretty good. And okay, this looks good. So I'm going to go over to my app.js. I will import high score list from high scores. That should be pretty good. And what I'll just do will be a good place. I think I'll put it as another row here, table row. And I don't think this is like this is probably invalid HTML, but let's see if this works. High score list. And so this should, insert my new high score list component into our overall app that we have. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a testing step that I think everyone should step back and, take time to understand this important distinction. If you noticed, a few minutes back I went and I compiled this program like this, Npm Run Build. And what that did is that built an optimized production build, quote unquote. That's what it's saying it's doing, that is what it's doing, and that's really great. That's really cool. But sometimes I just want to quickly debug our front end, and if there are any changes that we want to make on our front end that don't immediately depend on back end information, it's pretty easy, and it's not a bad idea to just say npm run start. And what this does, again, this just sets up the development server. And the nice thing about the development server is it only takes a few minutes to start up. We didn't have to wait for the whole compilation process. I can close this. Look, we have our new table here. It's pretty great. So that's all nice. And if we make a change, like what if I change this to say Daniel? Save that, compiles, and you don't have to wait for a few minutes. Now the caveat is that we don't have any connection to our backend. Our backend isn't really in existence on this demo server, which is fine for us now. So I mean, that's okay. That's all cool. But now that we have this, we want to be able to populate this high score list with some dynamic data, not something static, but something that's based off of a variable. And that's honestly pretty fun to do, in my opinion, because I mean that's like the bread and butter of making a cool dynamic web app, is being able to show repeating dynamic information. This could be like some bootstrap cards that have, I don't know, pictures for your Instagram clone or whatever. But it's pretty exciting and pretty satisfying to see it work out. So what I want to do is I want to make a new component that represents a single high score object, a single high score entry. And it's not going to be too complicated. What I'll just do is I'll say function high score entry, and this is what I'm going to do. Again, it also has parameters that we will use later. And what this will look like, it'll just be a row, a table row. So let's say return table row, and each table data piece, the first one will be, we'll use our templating structure that we have here in React, and I'll say params.highscoreObject.name. Remember, each high score object looks something like this, like const high score list equals, and then we remember we had something like name Eggert score 900, name Ning score I don't know, 79. So we want to be able to populate these with this data that we have. So this is just, we expect that this high score object within our parameters will just contain a single high score, structure like this. And so that's what we're expecting, that's what we're gonna code for. So then we can say, okay, params dot high score object dot score. So this shouldn't be too bad. And let's just try for a single row. Let's try for a single data row. It's a high score entry. And then for our params, we'll say high score object equals something like this. We'll say name Christian. Actually, yeah. We'll have our name be Christian and our score equals 45. Just average. Oh, let's see. Am I doing something silly here? I probably need to have another set of, there we go, because this is an object. Okay, that's fine. Params is not, yeah, let's put params there. Hi, okay, this looks pretty good. So let's see if this, let's try refreshing this. Look, we have our dynamic score data. That's cool. That's all fun, but this is only one. Are we going to have to manually type one of these out for each high score entry? And the answer is no, not at all. And so what we can do is we can use a nice, a commonly used feature in JavaScript and in React. And what we can use, we can basically map information from an array like this. I'll move this over down into here. We can map this array to a bunch of React components like this. We can say high score, I'll just say high score array. Call this high score array dot map. Let me knock out this line right here. And since this is some dynamic information, we want to wrap it around in these brackets. This is stuff that's variable. We'll say high score array dot map, and then this is a little kind of a callback function that gets called each time that we it's basically called for each item in this array. So we'll call this high score entry object, and what we can do is every time we want to return a new one of these high score entry components, so we call that function high score entry. And we can probably do this. So we will want to return a high score entry, and then what do we want to do? We want to pass our high score object, right? Our parameter. I think, yeah, high score object. High score object equals high score. This probably wasn't the best name. We'll say maybe current score. Call this current score. I don't know. Let's see. It looks like it's valid. And look, how cool is that? We now have this JSON list, or this JavaScript list of objects. And every time we add another one, I'll just say name slash. Oops. Every time we add another one, Oops. What did I do? Oop, I accidentally put a space. How about that? Every time we put every time we modify this array, we can save and recompile, and look at that. We have a new high score list. I'm gonna pause right now because I need to plug in my laptop. Okay, I believe that I am now unpaused. I'm going back to where we were. We now have this dynamic, high score list that can be updated using array data. So this is cool, but now we want to we want to be able to update this not from a hard-coded array, but something from a web request. So what we can do is we can knock these out, and instead of using highscoreArray.map, we want to pass these from our parameters. So we'll say params.highscoreArray.map. So this is pretty good. And let's go back up to our higher level app here. We have our high score list, and we want to pass some information, to our parameters here. Something like high score array equals something, and well, how do we know what something should be? Well, what we can do is, what we need to do is we need to retrieve this array through some sort of web request from the server, and I'll show you how to do that. So we need to have a score list array, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use the state here, so that way every time the score list gets updated we can re-render appropriately. So right here I'll say something like var score list, and then I'm going to make a new function called set, or maybe update, or actually I'll keep along the line, set score list equals use state, and I'm going to just have my start value be an empty array, since that's what it should be, right? It should be an empty array to start out with. And then what will we do? Well, we want to get our high scores. So I'm going to make another function that just gets our high scores, and we want to be able to get our high scores from a web request. So let's see. This should be an asynchronous function because we're doing some asynchronous tasks. Async function get high scores, and I don't think we need to pass any information. It's pretty self-explanatory. We just want to get our high scores, and then we have to fetch our high scores. So let's say const return object. This is going to be an object that contains our basically contains our request. It says await, and then we want to run the fetch command high scores, because this is, I believe this was the URL that we got our high scores from. Right, so high scores, fetch from high scores. And the reason why I used async here is because we could use a bunch of promises and callbacks, and have callbacks inside of callbacks. That's kind of a pain to use, and it's, especially for something like this, it's a bit more readable to have something look synchronous, but in the whole wrapping enclosure is going to be asynchronous, so that way we can call it and handle it appropriately. So let's see, if return object.ok, because if it's not okay, then it'll let us know that something's not okay. But let's start out to see if it's okay, and let's try this, because this might give some errors. We want to handle the errors appropriately. We'll say let's let parsed equals await return object.json. This is a function that basically gets our, our response from our server, and it starts out as just bytes basically, but this parses it into JSON. If there happens to be some issue where maybe it didn't send us JSON in response, then we need to catch that error. So catch E. This is a generic error, but we can have it more specifically catch that particular error. But if it is, we just want to make sure that we would just return an empty array for now. We can have some more fancy error handling in the future. But if it does work, we can say return parsed. And it might be even better just to put this all in one line. So we can even say return await return object.json. Something like that. And again, this is some asynchronous function. Await lets us wait for this to be done. Again, fetch is also asynchronous and it's declared as async. Await just gives us this waits for fetch to be done, kind of, and gives us the result. And if this also failed, then for now let's just return an empty array. Maybe we're not connected to our server, which is fine. That's gonna happen to us a few times. Or we can even say something like, this probably isn't the best way to go about things, but you can even say something like name not connected, and then score. I don't know. The score could be like -9,000. I mean, I'm not sure if it's absolutely necessary. But basically, we have a new function now that we can use to get our high scores. So this is pretty great. And what we should do is right when we start our app, we want to get high scores. So we can do something like this: get high scores. And then this is an asynchronous function, so we can say then after, and then we have our little callback scores, and we can have this arrow function. We can even go as far as saying update scores, update, or actually we call this set score list equals, and then pass these scores. So this is just a really quick one-liner way of doing things. This is a tiny little, anonymous function here. We say these scores that we get, pass them to our set score list. Basically set our score list to equal these scores. And what am I doing here? Yeah, this looks fine. I was afraid that I was accidentally sending just a raw object instead of an object within an array, but this looks pretty good for now. So let's see if this actually, oh yeah, one last thing I almost forgot. We want to make sure we pass our score list to our high score array, to our high score list. So let's see if this works. We compiled, running, name score. Let's see if we get any errors. We probably are getting errors. We have our get high scores then set score list scores. It makes sense that I would hope to see the error show up, but it does not appear to be showing up. But what we can do, I guess, right now is we can actually test to see if we're getting any information from our backend. So what we'll do again is compile this so that we can host this compiled JavaScript code from our backend server, from our Node.js server.js. So I'm going to run Npm Run Build, and it might take about a minute or so to compile. But then I want to launch our program. It's taking a little while. It's taking its time. So we've launched. Go to localhost. And how about that? Look, we have our high score list containing our high score data. Now, isn't this neat? I mean, we basically have connected, we've populated our data with high score, and it's also sorted. We may want to limit this to only show maybe the first 5 or the first, I think the first 5 is good. But let's try something. Let's try adding a high score post. Let's try adding, give Sash some more recognition here. So let's go here. And how about that? Look, we have an update right here. We have our, Sasha's high score. It's pretty great. Wonder if I'm doing anything dumb. You know what? I think I might have accidentally recursively called this, and it looks like I'm sending way too many requests, which isn't necessarily horrible, but it's not at all what I intended. I think I might have set up some sort of loop here where every time we're re-rendering the app, we're calling high scores. So this is a good thing to catch now before I accidentally kill someone's data. Let me pause this. So after some reading, I realized that there's a much less silly way to go about doing things so I wouldn't accidentally flood my own server with thousands of requests. And we use this with the use effects command here. This effects hook. And I personally am still learning about it myself, but from my understanding is these are functions, and we want to run these when we call these functions, we want to think of them as pure functions in that they don't modify any external state or data. They just pass this newly constructed component back to whoever called them, whichever line of code called them. But sometimes we want to do some side effects. And so what I'm doing here, hopefully I haven't even run it and tested yet, is that I intend to only call this effectful code on the very first, actually, let's see, let's put that back here. I want to only call this on the very first time that our very first time that we render this component. So I want to say something like set score list. Let's do something like this. Get high scores dot then we'll say high score list. Pass this to our set score list function. High score list. Maybe I should say score list. Score list. And then I'm probably missing parentheses. So ideally, we use our effect to only call this on the first render. That's why we pass this this blank array. I just learned this on Stack Exchange, so if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But let's see if this works. So I will refresh this and actually recompile. Make sure I don't get thousands and thousands of requests. The way that I found out this particular bug is through a really nice, we have an error. Where did I accidentally put, I don't need to put this component, did not. I was trying to test to see with something that I believe we've worked with in our course Lapilli, but is not applicable to this particular situation. The reason we found out about this particular error, where we have add cookies. Did it accidentally destroy the add cookies function? Huh. What happened to the add cookies function? Yes, I accidentally deleted add cookies. So what we want to do is we want to say, what was this? Use effect, not set effect. Use effect. Then we can call our function here. And after that, we go forth and let's see if this works. Let's build. Optimize production build. Wonderful. Once again, we have an error. Use effect is not defined. Might have to import use state. Use state, use effect. That would make sense. Okay, so what have we now? Looks like we're working, so let's restart our server. Let's go to localhost 3000, and oh yes, we have a very extensive high score list. Very good. And lucky for us, we are not sending thousands of requests. So it looks like we've solved that particular bug. I just found this out during recording, so I have an incorrect version on our GitHub repository. Time to get rid of that. But now we're able to retrieve data, but our last critical feature that we want to include is being able to post new data. And what we basically want is some sort of web form that lets us post and submit a new high score with our name. And so the next few minutes are just going to be going over how we set up a form, a web form. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to make another component. I'll call this name form. That's specifically going to only do the job of handling some user input, puts in their name. We already know the score, hopefully, and we use that to send some data over back to our backend. So let's import React from React. I might not even need to do this. I might be being silly. I'm just following this boilerplate. Then we say class. You know what? Heck, let's knock this out. Actually, no. Yeah, we need to extend React. Actually, this time we're not going to use a functional component. We're going to use a class component because the form contains some useful state that is going to be hard to store in a function component. So let's say class name form extends React.component because it's a component class. We have a constructor prop with our properties. I just realized I've been naming some of these properties params instead of properties. I need to rename them all back to properties. It doesn't change anything, but it could be misleading. So call our super class props, construct that. And then we want to set our state. I think this only state I'm going to store is probably the name that we want to input, because the actual score is going to be something that's handled on an upper level, handled by the app. So I'll say this.state equals name. Again, this is the user's inputted name that they want to submit to the high score list. And we want to be able to handle changing and submitting. So this.handle change equals this.handle change.bind. This we're gonna do this.handle submit equals this.handle submit.bind. to this. And now let's define our different functions. A function to handle changes to our component, and a function to handle submits. Actually, you know what? I feel like I'm talking about all these changes and submits, but I've kind of glossed over the fact that we're just making a form, and I think I should jump to that first. So sorry to be bouncing around, but I think this might make things a little more clear. So we have our render function, right? And our render function just goes and it returns, for the most part, just a basic form. So we have form, just a web form, and our onSubmit handler will be our this.handle submit, because we're going to make a new function right here. Handle submit event, and we'll do stuff here, right? And then we'll probably have a label that will say name, and then our text input for the person's name, input type equals text value, and our value is going to be our current name. So in our parameters, in our brackets, curly braces rather, we'll say this.state.name. This is our state right here. And whenever we change, we want to handle this change to our change handler. So we'll say on change equals this.handle change. So it looks pretty good. And obviously we want to close our tag for our input, and then we have our submit button. So we'll say input type equals submit, and our value equals submit. It's just going to be our submit button. So this is looking pretty good, pretty clean, and I guess finally we need to export this. Export default name form. And so what's happening here is, this is just the basic JSX that we use to format, render our form. This is a handler function to handle our submits, and then this is another function, handle change. It just handles changes to our form, or just our text input. So we have event. On handle change, we want to set the value of our state to whatever is within the text box. So we can say something like this not set state, and then we'll say name is, we're going to set the name to our whatever is the value within our text, our little text input here. So we'll say event.target.value. It's just that refers to our text input. And then to handle submit, I want to pass the submit function from a higher level in our program, because I don't want this function deep down in here to have to deal with all the intricacies of making a post request. So I'm just going to have it call our submit function that's going to be passing the properties. So I'll say, I'll first say a little alert, you submitted for, and then this.state.value, actually .text, or name. So this will tell us a little bit about what you just submitted. And then we want to call a function. Well, let's just start with this. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We definitely want to call event.preventDefault, because the default behavior for a form, an HTML form here, is to to immediately redirect, but we don't want to immediately redirect because we want to stay on our web page here. We want to stay on our single page app, so we want to prevent that default behavior of a form. So now we are exporting our name form, and I think what I want to do is I want to add this form as like the last row in my high score list, so that way you can say, hey, let's add my new high score here. So I'll say something like this, table row, and then I need to import, I probably can get rid of this, I need to import name form from name form. So that's cool. And what I can do is I can go name form. Let's see if this works. Okay. So once again, I'm going to stop using this node server, this fancy backend that we've been writing. I'm just going to demo and demonstrate with our create React app test server, this demo server, npm run start. Just because it's really quick to debug and test front end changes, and it shows that we've really decoupled our logic, front end logic, from the back end. And if we want to run the front end independently for testing purposes, we can do that. I probably have some error. Like, what's happening here? Form cannot appear as a child of table row. That makes sense. So what if, instead of having it in here, we had it in our app.js? To have our form along here. I don't think this worked. Oh, yes, we have to import name form from name form. Oh, name form is not defined. We have an error here. We have a few things. Form cannot appear as a child of. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. We want to stick our form somewhere. So I'm just going to stick it right over under the header. I don't think it's going to be very. Oh, there we go. We have our name form. I guess up there is okay. I feel like it'd be cleaner to have it next to our score here. Maybe I could put it in a little div. What if I have div? This is very clean, isn't it? Okay, I guess this is fine. Not the best, not the cleanest. What if I said Christian? I want to submit my name here. And look, you submitted for Christian. So we have a very basic form. It's not doing anything fancy now. But what we want to be able to do is we want to tie this form submit function to this handles the submit event handler to a post function that posts our new high score to the server. So what I'm going to do is I am going to pass this property that we have and call a function that we pass through the properties. And this is how we're going to do it. I am going to call a function this.props.submit function, and then pass our state value, this.state.name. So say, hey, we submitted something and we want to pass this name, and I'm going to make a new function up here called, we have a function somewhere here called getHighScore. I'm going to make a new async function function called post high score. Post high score. And what is this function going to do? Well, first we need to take in some information. We want to take in the name that we're posting from, and or maybe do we want to post that name, or we can post. Maybe we can separate this. We can name this submit my score name. I'll call this my name to be secure and about what I'm doing. And I'll say I'm going to make a new score object. Remember how we have our score objects? I'll make a new function to build a score object. So let's say function build score object. My name. And what do we do when we build a score object? We just return something of this format, which is name equals my name, score equals our cookie count. Remember, this is our variable that we have that basically stores our current our current score. It's our current number of cookies. So I'll say cookie count, right? And so that's working out pretty well. So for submit my score, I want to do the following. I want to create a new score object based off of my name. So I'll say let score object equals build score object my name. That's great. And then I can maybe make a little log. Console.log. I'll say posting score and then maybe I'll say plus score object just for debugging purposes. And then I want to post my score, and I'll have this actual posting function in a separate function, since just to break up these different levels of abstraction. So let's say we want to post my score. Post my function post my score. What do we need to do? We need to make a post request. My score object. And how do we make a post request on the front end? Well, actually, this probably should also be async because it's asynchronous. But how should we do this? Let's do the following. Const request equals await fetch. So this is going to be another fetch, but our fetch is going to be a little more complicated than our fetch here because it's not just a get, it's a post. So we'll say it's going to be the same URL, high scores. It's going to be the same endpoint address, but we need to have a few different settings. And what are those settings? We just define them right here as a parameter. The method is not going to be a get request, it's going to be a post request. Mode, this has to do with cross origin scripting. I'm just copying this really from the tutorial. I need to really research more what this means. I'm not caching. Credentials. This is the same origin. Again, these are security features that I honestly, I don't have very much familiarity over, but I'll read a bit more about them, and if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to chat. And then our headers. What are we going to have for our headers of our request? Well, we want to make sure that the server knows that this is going to be a JSON file. So we'll say content type. Make sure that you have this capitalized correctly. It's caused me lots of grief. Application JSON. Alright, looks good. And then our body of our message will be JSON. Actually, yeah, we'll say JSON.stringify. And then we'll have let's see, what was the exact format that we wanted our scores in? Let's see if we remember. In server.js, we wanted to have an object called highScoreMessage, which makes sense. So what we can do here in app.js, we say highScoreMessage, and that is my score object. We stringify that, we turn that into a JSON string. I don't need this semicolon, that was silly. So we wait for all of this asynchronous behavior, and after that's done, we can return request.json, because this is also something that's asynchronous, so we just want to wait for that to be done. So we have our try, but we also want to catch any potential errors. Catch E. I'm not going to handle them properly yet, but I'll just say console.error failed to save score plus our error, so that can hopefully shed some light over whatever happens. Okay, so we have post my score. So after I say this, I will say maybe even yeah, we can probably print out the result of our post. So say console.log await post my score object. Let's see if that works. And then finally, after all this has been said and done, we want to let's see. Let's just see if this works so far. So submit my score. We want this to be called by our name form. So every time we submit a name form, we want to update the score accordingly. So I'll say, let's see what was the exact function that we wanted to pass in the properties. This.props.submit function. So this is what's going to happen. We'll say submit function equals submit my score. Not sure if this is going to work. Let's see. Hello. Check the console. Submit. We submitted for hello. How about that? Look. So most of all, for the most part, it seems to have worked because we tried to post, but obviously we're not running our server right now, so we get a 404 not found. But let's try it with the actual server running. So again, this is the same process where we build so that we can serve this code from our Express server. You can probably go and make a more clean workflow that goes ahead and I don't know, combines the cool debug tools with Express, but that's for another day, and I'm not particularly familiar with that. It's a whole world of customization that's available to developers. So we can launch our program, I believe, unless we have some critical error. So localhost 3000, and suppose I want to say, oh, Christian, yeah, that's me, and I have, let me get some points first. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think that's sufficient. So I'll say submit. Okay. Now, mind you, we haven't made any code to actually update once we submit, but let's relog in. And hey, look, there's my Christian 12. It doesn't seem to be ordered in the way that we want it to be. I wonder if me putting in something separate with the. I think we have at least one pair that's not in the proper format. That might be confusing things. But look, we've updated our high score list, which is pretty cool. But now we want to, reflect our changes here on our. We want to reflect our changes here on our server, on our front end. And I guess what we can do is we can actually go back to our API that we've developed here. This post high score handler. And then maybe our save high scores function can, instead of resolving success, it can resolve our current high scores. And then our post request will be able to return our list of current high scores, which is cool. And what we can maybe do is we have our app here that goes and we submit our score, we log this post my score JSON. But what if we maybe could update our score if we did something like new scores, let new scores equal await post my score, await post my score, and then we can console.log these new scores, and then after that we could run something along the lines of, I think our function to update the scores or update the score list would be set score list. So set score list new scores. Let's see if this works. Not totally convinced that it will. Again, we have to recompile. And while we're here, let's limit our current high scores. You need to remember the JavaScript notation for like a subarray. Oh, well, let's start here. So suppose I go forward, I make 20 cookies and I want to memorialize this. Let's say I'm going to name myself Brodo. Submit, go. How about that? Look, we basically finished for the most part. Not as pretty as we'd like it to be, but we have our high score list that we can upload. This is an example of connecting our backend to our front end, doing this two-way communication, this behavior to store the state between visits to our website. But as one last housekeeping task, I'm just going to limit this to 5 high scores. So I'll say get high scores. I'll say parsed equals parsed dot I'll have to remember. Let's see. JavaScript. I'm not an expert. JavaScript subarray. It's slice. How do we do this? Slice. Okay, let's try this. Parsed. Let's say parsed equals JSON.parsed and then slice between 1 and 5. Slice 1, 0, and 6. Okay. Again, if this is not an array, this is gonna shoot an error at us. So we can even try that. Try parsed equals parsed dot slice 0, 6, and then resolve that parsed. And if it doesn't work, we can say catch. error, and we can say reject with our error. That'll be pretty good. So our get high scores is now limited. Yeah, if I do this several times, I might want to make it into its own helper function, but I guess I could just have this respond. I mean, I don't know if we really want another write call if not necessary. Whatever. We'll just use this. In our save high scores, let's say resolve current high scores dot slice 06. And I misspelled slice. Refresh. And let's see. Nice. 0, 1, 2. So we get the top 6. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Get the top 5. I know how to count. And say, hey, well, I'm gonna try to get to the top of this high score list. So let's go. What's the strategy here? Should I just keep clicking cookies? Should I wait until I get to grandma levels? I think the grandmas are really good investments. Like, look at that. We're going pretty far. We're almost. I think I'll get a bakery the next time around. Let's see. This is a speed run. Any percent. I'm doing pretty well, I think. Okay. I'm definitely going to be at the top of the list, but I just want to be so far at the top of the list. And I think that's sufficient. So, I don't know what I should name myself this time around. I'll just say, how about Pippin? Submit. Wow, look at that. It even reshuffled for us. So, this more or less concludes the backend workshop. It was a little longer than I expected it. Thank you everyone for your patience. This is the first time I've ever done something of a live technical demo. It's not really live, it's recorded, but a technical demo of a similar nature. If anyone has any questions at all, feel free to message me, drop a message in the Piazza, or just message me at cbigular@g.ucla.edu. Not to dox myself, but I'm more than happy to answer questions that you have about this project, because I want everyone to succeed in this class. So thank you everyone, and good evening.